All right. Hey, everyone. Thank you for coming out to the stream. We have a pretty special show. Fjolnir has been in his workshop. He's been tinkering away. He has put together a really impressive couple of presentations going over Floki Saga, going over Ingolf Saga, and really just diving into like crazy amounts of interesting detail. And so I want to thank Fjolnir for that. He's going to be presenting most of the stream, and we'll jump in with some comments. And Walrus is also joining us. So Walrus has his very own YouTube channel where he talks about, a lot of things of culture, history, and so forth from a traditional lens. And really excited to have both of you on the show today. So Fjolnir, you want to tell us a little bit about what we'll be covering today?
Yes, thank you very much. Today we are going to cover the settlement of Iceland. And the settlement of Iceland is from a book called Landnámsbók, and it's a huge book with many short stories, basically. And I thought we were going to do this maybe chronologically. So we start with the ones that may have happened the earliest, and then we work our way, to the later ones. And we're going to begin with the story of Floki Viðgerðarson. If you pop up the first slide here.
Yeah, all right. So here is the slideshow. Oh, I am on slide 28.
Yeah, the first slide.
Slide 1.
While he's finding the correct slide, I can just jump in here and say that I've been invited on to be the Norwegian alibi for whenever we're going to be brushing up against Norwegian history. My Icelandic esoteric settlement lore isn't nearly as good as Fjolnir is. So if I'm a bit silent, it's just because I don't want to derail the presentation with any unnecessary questions.
We also need that token Norwegian. This is like when some American has talks about
I'm a diversity hire. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, diversity hire. It's like when some native New Age guy, talks about Native American spirituality. He has to have like two authentic native guys.
Exactly.
Yeah, to valid as tokens, basically, the real deal. So we have like an Icelander and a Norwegian. So yeah, let's begin. Floki Viðgerðarson. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we're gonna ask there are many rumors of who discovered Iceland, and there's been a lot of debate about this. There have been, theories that Iceland was first inhabited by Irish monks, and they called the island Thule. Because of that, they were scholars, and from the Greek, name of some other island maybe. There is no evidence for this, no archaeological evidence. I think Snorri mentioned this, and he placed them in an island called Papi, which is a small island from Iceland. I think it's in the east. I can't remember exactly where, but no archaeological evidence have been found of any inhabitation in that island. A medieval scholar called Ari Fróði, a priest, he was promoting this idea, and the only evidence for this is perhaps a man-made cave called Kverkahellir, and that might have been inhabited during the settlement age, and there's a drawn cross in it, but it is not that big. And if there were actual settlements here by literal praying, small monasteries, we had seen a lot more evidence of it. So it might have just been, some Scandinavian dude living there during the settlement age. My speculation is that this theory is like a myth that developed, like a kind of folk tale after Christianization, to make the claim that Iceland had been Christian from the beginning. This is not something made up by Snorri or Ari. This is just, stories change, myths develop, and then Snorri collected these folktales, and the folktales had warped into this, it was the Christians. Iceland had been Christian from the beginning. So that's at least my theory on it. I don't know, and nobody knows, but that's my take. Yeah.
Fit nicely with the way the wind was blowing at the time politically.
Yeah, it's just not for the narrative, a narrative thing, basically. Going with
So that gives it a sort of, this land has been consecrated by monks type idea.
Yeah, it was like the first, it's just the political correctness of the time, basically. But my main point is there's no evidence for it, no archaeological evidence at all. And all the experts agree on that. And the A is named Pape because of Snorri, I think. So the next guy, next we're going to move on to a Norwegian man who discovered Iceland, who was called Nath Oddur. Nath Oddur was I can't exactly remember where he was from. He was probably some sort of explorer, basically. And I think he discovered Iceland by accident. And
I've heard that too, and that's interesting considering for those of you who are familiar with my channel, quite a few episodes ago we did our second part of the Scandinavian history stream.
Yeah.
And we discussed for a while how a lot of the winds on the western coast of Norway don't necessarily encourage you to end up somewhere like Iceland, but more towards, say, Denmark or England. So to accidentally find Iceland is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, this was around. They speculate this was around 860 when Naðoddur arrived here, and he might have been, going to the British, because there was an established route between Scandinavia and the British Isles, because we had, we literally had these miniature kingdoms of jarls in the Isles.
Mm-hmm.
We had colonies in the British Isles. So he might have been on his way there and accidentally drifted here. And he apparently sailed around the country and discovered that it was an island. He called it Snæland, which means snowland, land of snow. So this was probably during the winter. And he later settled in the Faroe Islands. So I think he is a folk hero for the Faroese, basically.
He's their Christopher Columbus.
Yeah, he's there, but yeah. So there's probably a statue of him there and everything. And the next one was Garðar Svavarsson, a Swedish man.
Let's go. All right.
Yeah. So, of all people, a Swede who ended up briefly residing here. He came from Sweden, obviously, and he came because he heard about the exploits of Nattóðir, and he said he wanted to find this place. So that was when the rumor began spreading about this mysterious island to the west of Norway, northwest of Norway. And also one interesting fact about, he named it Snæland, which means, sorry, not Snæland. He named it Garðarshólmur, which means the hills of Garðar. So not that, pious.
He just named it after himself.
Yeah. So it's like Matt coming and naming his, Mattland or Matt country. Not very subtle. And one interesting factoid about his lineage, he had his grandson Hróar had his sister, Hróar's sister, he was married to the sister of Gunnar á Hlíðarenda, the hero in the saga, who died in Fljótshlíð. So I bet you didn't know that. It is interesting lineage there, or speculation of lineage. Apparently, that's, according to the sagas, that is how his offspring ended up here anyway, basically.
Yeah, pretty much a Cecil Rhodes move, as Drongo says. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, Rhodesia,
Yeah. And then we had Flóki Vilgerðarson, which is the man we're going to talk about today. It's just the third man to arrive in Iceland, the third human to arrive here, according to Landnámabók. And he resided for about 1 winter. There are fringe theories about like ancient Greeks, a Greek explorer visit, that resided here for a short time, and also Roman expedition, stuff like that. There's no evidence for it, so this is official history, but this is confirmed history. So we're just going to go with that for now, basically. So next slide, please. Yes, description. As we all know, he was obviously, if you look at the hidden messages in the sagas, he had heavy eyeshadow and was strapped in biker leather. And as we all know, no, maybe not, but.
And he had dreadlocks too, right?
Yeah, dreadlocks and a goatee. And no, I don't think so. I may be getting confused. The description is not well described, but he was a Norwegian man, and he lived in Rogaland. Walrus, do you know where Rogaland is?
Rogaland, yes, that is on the obviously on the west coast of Norway, quite a bit south, really. If I had a map, I could show it, but it is the area where a lot of the action was going on at the time. This is where Harald Fairhair, Hofagre, would arrive later on the scene and sort of unite a lot of the chieftains and crown himself the first king of Norway, pretty much.
Yeah. This was also probably around the same time. And this is before Haraldur's, Haraldur's time. This was a bit before he. It was still a time of petty kings and.
Oh yeah. No, I don't know the dates here, but I can assume that we're before him. But I'm just saying that this is the area where a lot of the action was centered during this age.
Yeah, and he wanted to find Garðarshólma. Yeah, as you can see. I have a there's a
And that-
picture of
that-
Rogaland in my next slide, by the way. So
Yeah, that map pin is a bit misleading. I mean, most settlements would be along the coastline, not in the middle of
It'd
the
be like
mountains,
along
really.
here.
Well, yeah, and possibly even
Yeah.
further down towards the coastline. You see, there's a lot of small fjords here. So
Yeah.
usually settlements would be at the end of the like furthest in the fjords here.
Mhm.
So
yeah, so maybe we can put them much closer to the shoreline, maybe where he lived.
Be a bit. I was thinking, yeah, that looks a bit inconvenient to get to the sea.
yes,
Yeah, so back to the slides. If you Yes, and he was described as a great Viking, which is very, very awesome, and an adventurer. So, and he wanted to find. He heard this rumor from Garðar, which Garðar heard from Naðudur about this land. So you can see this rumor starting to spread. And the thing is, these were probably wealthy guys because they could afford their own ship and a crew, and they went on like raids and maybe visited the isles regularly. So I would maybe argue that having your own longship at that time was probably equivalent of having a private jet today. So these were like really well-off guys.
or at least they came from well-off towns.
Yeah.
Because usually it's something you do. I don't know how usual it was, but I have read about, sort of it's a nice way to get rid of the second son is to just send him on an adventure with a boat, and have the first one to take over, right?
That's one
happen to be
theory.
the
That's one
chieftain.
theory. Yeah, that's one
There
theory.
is always that surplus. You've always got a few too many sons.
Yeah. So you send him off with a ship and a crew, right? With a bunch of other guys who are quite rowdy, and tell them to come back when they found some riches or new land, right?
Yeah, but these were no peasants. I want to tell you, these were like guys always serving this or that jarl, or sometimes the king, and they could have might be doing it for the sake of just telling stories. When they came home, they could boast about their exploits. Like found a new land, and there's like, holy crap. And when he came back, which is later going to later, like the king wanted to, and everybody in Norway wanted to hear about his journey. So maybe that was one of the driving force. And also he might have had jet black hair because he had the name Hrafnaflóki, which means a raven Floki. It was his nickname. The official story is like he kept 3 ravens and all that. But one alternative theory that I heard that he had jet black hair, which was unusual, which is where he got his nickname, because people always got their nickname from something unusual or some event.
I thought it was just that he kept ravens.
Yeah, that was the official. But I heard that
okay.
because you can, if you go to the next slide, maybe. Yeah, if you had he had 3 ravens, and the ravens were used before the sunstones. This was nobody was using sunstones back then, according to the sagas. So and other archaeological research. So everybody was using ravens. So why would he be called Raven Floki?
Would these ravens be used at sea, like to send him off and see if they find land? Is that the idea?
He had 3 ravens, and the ravens were released when they were suspected, when they were near land. And when the raven didn't return, they followed that raven. Because ravens have a very good instinct for navigation. He 3 ravens. Ravens used for the sunstones. We're going to talk about them now a bit. They are very interesting. They have like special polarizing attributes and are used as navigational instruments. They have been pretty much popularized by now. So if we go to the next slide, this is what we call silverberg. This is a stone that is only found here, I think. This is pretty much unique to Iceland. And it has very special optical qualities, which is I'm going to explain now if you will go to the next slide. So we're going to go a bit into fiber optics here. So
you weren't expecting that, were you, folks?
Yeah. So this is a basic glass block, and I'm going to explain how light is refracted. You can see the ray coming in on the top, and you can see the degree of the angle, the incident ray, it's called, and the degree T, which is the degree in which the refracted ray inside the rock, it can vary between glass, the types of glass you're talking about. So you can have a glass that refracts that has a wider or a more straight angle, and some glass rocks refract on a completely polarized. And on the other side, you have the same angle as the exit ray as the incident ray. This is how, this is fiber optic 1. If you go to the next slide, this is how silverberg. It's called Icelandic car, I think. No, Icelandic spar. Icelandic spar is the English name for it. The unpolarized ray goes into the crystal, and it duplicates the image. So you have two. So you have instead of a single exit ray, you have an extraordinary ray and the ordinary ray. So you basically get double vision from looking into the ray, into the crystal.
Kind of a 3D effect, I imagine.
Yeah, kind of like you just get two images. It duplicates the image because of that. It has very special properties, and this is only found here. And it is very, very likely that the Vikings, that this is the sunstone that is talked about, because they did experiments on if you can use this to navigate, by placing them at. If you look at the next slide, please. Yes, they did this experiment, placing it in a. If you could actually navigate with this. So as you can see how they, and this experiment was a success, and you can see the atmosphere polarization when the sun is hidden behind the clouds is when this is particularly useful. So the navigator points the sunstone at the patch of the sky and twists it until it appears the brightest. The crystal now points towards the sun because of the unique duplicative refractive properties. And then the navigator repeats the process for another patch of sky. The intersection of the two readings reveals the sun's location. Again, because of they probably maybe measured the refractive differentiation. They could actually use it to pinpoint the sun behind the cloud. And this is how they used the sunstone to navigate. But Floki was exploring before the sunstone was discovered, and the sunstone was probably discovered here in Iceland.
I mean, that's just some remarkable ingenuity, and to even, I mean, I suppose the one advantage you have when you're out sea for so long is that you're bored, so you have time to come up with some pretty ingenious ideas. But I mean, that's just remarkable to figure that out.
Yeah, what was remarkable is also how shortly after Iceland was discovered that they started using this according to like reference in the sagas. And there's also about the stone, it is very valuable even to today. You know, in World War II, they were I think the Americans or the British, they started mining it to create a better, you know, scope for aiming like artillery scope or something. So it is really, really useful and really, really rare, and it can only be found here, I think. I don't know where it. There was like this Icelandic physics professor that pretty much dedicated like a large portion of her life researching its properties, you know. So I'm gonna read here an excerpt. So Danish archaeologist, not yet. Danish archaeologist Thorkild Ramsku posted that the sunstone could have been one of the minerals Icelandic spar that polarized the light by which, the azimuth of the sun determined in partly overcast sky when the sun just below the horizon. The principle is used by many animals. Polar flights applied the idea before advanced techniques became available. Ramsku, this is some Danish archaeologist, further conjectured that the Icelandic spar could have aided navigation in open sea in the Viking period. This idea has become very popular, and research has shown that a sunstone could be used in nautical navigation. So, and also I'm going to read you a reference about this stone from a medieval source. So, Rauðúlfsþáttur, which is a tale of Saint Olaf, and it is the only medieval source mentioning how the sunstone was used. It's a thoroughly allegorical work. A round and rotating house visited by Olaf has been interpreted as a model of the cosmos and the human soul, as well as a prefiguration of the church. The intention of the author was to achieve an apotheosis of Saint Olaf through placing him in a symbolic seat of Christ. The house belongs to the center of abodes of the sun, which seemed widespread in medieval literature. Saint Olaf used the sunstone to confirm time-reckoning skill of his host right after leaving his allegorical house. So so here you hear it referencing in a medieval source. So apotheosis with Saint Olaf through Icelandic spar. That should be a new meme right there. So yeah, that's pretty much the maybe we could do more of a deep dive about the sunstone, but this is something that, you know, this is, you know, just the basics, I think. So if you go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Any questions by that?
Yeah, we've got a question here from Max. So before we get on to the next stuff, what is the reason that Greenland was called what it was in Iceland, given the irony? So as far as if my memory is correct, I mean, it was Eric the Red who named Greenland, was it not?
Yes, I think so.
And this was, as I believe, and it's been a while since I've read the Saga of Eric the Red, but I believe it was meant to entice people to come visit Greenland. Although it wasn't, because Iceland had already been named and had been around for some time before this, so it wasn't. So there's a little bit of sort of irony there, but it came a bit later on.
So this is one theory. It's possible, but we're gonna, as we dive deeper into Floki Saga, the Landnámabók gives the reason why he named the country Iceland, and that will be revealed later.
Because it was Snaland for Snowland before that, which is similar, but
So, and they also all were during the winter. So it's one theory, but I like most experts don't think that's the case. They think it's just because of where they were at what particular time, and also Greenland was. It was I think Brattahlíð was the location. It was a pretty fertile place back then, because the climate was more temperate. They could actually grow hay there and pig and raise livestock. And the Greenland colony was destroyed or abandoned because of lowering of temperatures. They just left. So yeah, people get confused about this, but like I said, I don't know. But my personal take is that no, stick to the sagas basically, or what the actual stick to Snorri basically. Yeah. So he launched an expedition from somewhere between Hödarland.
We're back to
back to now.
Vilgardson, yes.
Yeah, now we need Walrus's take on Norwegian geography. Hördarland and Rögaland. It was somewhere between those places.
Okay.
Do you know where that is?
Yes, Hordaland would be a general area where you find Bergen today in Norway, which is on sort of the. If you can pull up the map again, I can show you.
Next slide. Is a map.
Okay.
Hang on. Next. Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
So here apparently you had. See the place called Flokavarði. That is like the speculative. You see the red dot. Supposedly.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
It's they archaeological guess where he might have been. So yeah.
Okay.
You know anything about this area, Walrus?
It would be. I do know something about it. I think there's a town there today that's not huge, but it's quite a big area to say between basically Hordaland and Rogaland, because that's quite a bit of land between them, and especially quite a bit of settlement between them. I would imagine during this time, but it seems that the specific one they're referring to here would be. You see, there's this almost like what's it called, peninsula that stretches out with the Flokavarði. There's a town there called Haugesund today, which is a fishing town. It seems like it's the same place. Yeah, there you got it. Or it might be on the tip of it. I'm not quite sure from the map you showed me, but either here or if you go a bit north, to keep going, just keep going a bit more. Here you go. So here you can see it's a bit larger settlement. That's a possibility. I'm just theorizing here. So
Are there any place names that can be linked to Floki in that area?
Yeah. Not that I can pull off the top of my head, no. But I can try to do like a quick search if you keep talking, and I'll see if I can find anything.
I'll just go to the previous slides. Well, maybe. From the beginning. Top. Yeah. So yeah, he launched his expedition supposedly from that area. He held a great bloat before the journey, which is just a pagan ritual. This ritual is not
this
described.
Like the horse sacrifice?
The ritual is not described in any detail whatsoever. It's just said that he held a bloat. It could have been a prayer. It could have been a, a thorough ritual. But we did know that some oracle was involved, or something like that.
All right, I have a very tenuous link.
Those are the best
peninsula, the local Viking club, meaning like the Viking village. I suppose LARPers would be the best, but it's a bit more of, it's not a LARP. It's a bit more of a like historical reenactment, I guess. Seems to have some talks about this, but they won't give me any more information unless I show up, it seems. But that's from that specific peninsula. So
might be worth it. Just... Might have to go undercover.
I think it's just one of those things where it's like they're trying to sell you into coming to it. But that's the best I could find.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, like I said, nothing is known about this bloat. Bloat, the word itself means it's related to blood. So it could be referring to, some sort of blood sacrifice. That's one theory. Sacrificing an animal or something. He built a varða, which is a type of mount, supposedly as a part of the ritual. So a varða is, they're all over the place here, and we built them here like for many centuries after the Viking Age, as a remains of marking your trail, so you could so you knew your way back. Do you have this tradition in Norway? When we were traveling across close to the highlands, you would stack these rocky mounts. Yeah. These wards. Every few kilometers. And
you still do it. We still do it to this day, but more in a touristy way, because we mark them with like route colors and markers to help tourists stay on track.
So he apparently
same thing goes.
So he apparently built a ward, and this was some sort of ritualistic part of the ritual, and it doesn't go deeper into. It's the only thing he actually did in the ritual was just build this ward, and he named I think the ward was called itself Flokavarði, and then the place became known as Flokavarði later. So which is kind of weird. So it might have, it could have been, speculation like he's marking, his spot where he is leaving for this great journey or something. Just a part of that, this is the first, the first, when you're building a building, you make the first shovel, the first nail in a railway, stuff like that. And it could have been some
Bit of a political move.
Yeah, some sort of that ritual. Like, this is my first step on a great journey, and this is Flokavarði, the mount that marks the beginning of it. Yeah, that's my speculation, but like I said, we can't.
I found one more source claiming that Loki traveled from Haugesund, and that is a German travel site which advertises some accommodations in the area.
Yeah.
So I can't make a 100% hard claim to this, but there seem to be some, at least, if nothing else, local lore about it.
Yeah. So he set sail, and he first sailed to the Shetlands for some reason. Do you know where the Shetland Isles are? It was called Hjaltland by the Nords. If you could bring up a map again.
No problem. There does seem to be this little bit of island hopping here.
See the island.
North of the British and east of the Faroe. Yeah, there it is.
These are the Shetlands. So he first stopped apparently somewhere north of the Shetlands there. That was his first stop.
Oh, north of the Shetlands?
I think so.
The region.
Yeah. And he lost his daughter while he was there. His daughter drowned in a lake in the Shetlands, and that lake was called. His daughter's name was Geirhildur, and that lake was called Geirhildarvatn, and is now called Grish. If you look at the previous slides, I think like Grishlock or something. Yeah. The lake was called, I think, by him, Geirhildarvatn. Today it's called Gerstdalok. Celtic is so fucking weird. At this time, by the way, the Norwegians, they controlled the Shetlands as well as Orkney, and some isles in the south of Scotland.
Orkney, for the listeners, is the northern tip of Scotland, pretty much.
We owned those places. We had colonies there. We had jarls ruling directly over those places, and I'm not sure that there were any Celts there at all during that time. So these were Scandinavian settlements for a long, long time. So if you go to the next slide, yeah, this is a Barða, and the next, this is also a typical word, basically. Next one. Yeah, we covered that. Next one. This is Loch Geirhildarvatn. Basically, we're just going to call it Geirhildarvatn. This is the lake today. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the crew. Þórólfur, I think Þórólfur and Herjólfur, they were two dudes, and they, I think, sailed with him from Norway. They met Faxi in the Shetlands, and Faxi was a dude from the Hebrides, which are a cluster of isles in the southern Scotland. He was a so-called Suðureyjamaður. Now, you might step and think, is he a Celt? This is a Celtic dude that recruited, and I think not, because during that time the Hebrides were directly ruled by a Norwegian jarl, I think, which was one of Iceland's first settlers, by the way. He was called Ketill Flatnefur. He ruled that area, and there were many Scandinavians living there. And recently, they found a huge archaeological evidence in the Hebrides confirming the Norse colonies there. So Faxi was most likely a colonist from the Hebrides, a Norwegian Norse colonist. He was not a Celt. And also his name, Faxi, it doesn't sound Celtic, it sounds Nordic. Faxi means in Icelandic like a mane of hair. It's called a fax on a horse. The mane the mane of a horse is called fax.
Isn't that Gandalf's horse?
Yeah, fax. This is not like you hear these Celtic words. They sound really weird. And when you see, as soon as we lost control of these areas, the place name changed. They Geirmundarvatn, for example, Geirhildarvatn was renamed to Gritsloch or whatever. And the Hjaltland was renamed to Shetland.
Yep.
So when the Celts gained control of the area, they changed the names. So there probably weren't that many Celts there to begin with. So yeah, my speculation is Faxi was not a Celt. He was just a Viking dude, basically. And he spoke Old Norse. He spoke Icelandic. So I don't record many. If Celts would make the effort to learn Old Norse, maybe unless they were forced to, but yeah. So Ketill Flatnefur, he is another settler. He was a jarl in the Hebrides. He settled Iceland, and we might cover him in a later stream. He has his own saga. So next stream. Next slide. So the journey north, they sailed from Shetland to the Faroe Island. They seem to have been like a Faroe Island, seemed to have been like a pit stop or some outpost in this route, because they always made a stop in the Faroe Island. He gave away his daughter in marriage. So he brought his whole family, apparently, all of his children and his wife. And he brought all of his cattle, by the way. He also apparently conducted the ceremony himself. So he was both, like, he married the couple, which is really weird. So he could have been like some sort of form of clergyman, or maybe, the father could directly marry his daughter or his child during that time before Christianization. We don't know. So yes, and then he sailed north, and he sailed for a long time. It was a long journey north, and he sailed with the ravens. He still had the ravens. The story goes, he released the first raven, and then he just flew and returned back. The second raven flew straight up and down. The third one did not return. And then Floki followed him, and then he found Iceland. So yeah, next slide. So when we arrive in Iceland, he arrived in the eastern part somewhere. That also seemed to have been the arrival where most if not all of the settlers first arrived. And then they sailed along the coastlines, either southward or northward, mostly southward. So they arrived at Reykjanes Peninsula, and when they spotted Snæfellsnes, which is a peninsula that you can see from Reykjanes, apparently. Yeah. So it's a shame that I can't use my mouse, but if you go with the mouse down. So you see this peninsula. It looks like a boot. That's Reykjanes. And if you scroll, minimize, yeah, and they sailed around that coast area. Yeah, and this bay area, this huge bay area, you can see this is this fjord is called Borgarfjörður, and you can see, and this bay is called Faxaflói, the bay that runs in Faxi's Bay.
I see.
So his bay is named after Faxi. So, and he apparently mistook this fjord for a river. He thought this was a gigantic, Borgarfjörður was a gigantic river running into the ocean. And then they sailed, if you move, yeah, up. Okay, stop. They sailed then upwards along the coasts and to the West Fjords, which is this detachment, up. Yeah, there, around there. They landed somewhere around there. And in a fjord there, this is called the West Fjord because you have this cluster, like this small island that seems to be loosely attached to Iceland. You have so many fjords there, which is why I called the West Fjord, means fjord to the west. And he settled into a fjord in the south there, which is called Vatnafjörður or Waterfjord. If we go back to the slides.
Is this it?
Yeah. Can you zoom in?
That seems to be it.
Vatarnas?
Yeah, but that's Nes, which is is it headland in English?
I think you could just Google Vatnafjörður.
How do you spell that?
Vatna fjörður. Yeah. I think that's it. Vatnanes, yeah.
Hey, yeah. Anyways, I'll go back to the slides here.
Yeah. So I think I have a map in one of my slides. Okay, so Faxi, when he was in the peninsula, the Reykjanes, he spoke this line: Það mun vera mikið land sem við höfum fundið. Hér eru vatnsföll stór. And that means this is a great land that we have found with great falls of water and rivers. So this is a direct translation of it. Yeah, and he might have been referring to the bay of Borgarfjörður, which he mistook for a river. The bay is today called Faxaflói. And yeah, as I said, they landed in the West Fjords. So we go to the next slide.
Thanks, man.
I'm actually glad I managed, because I was reading that when you had the slide open earlier, and I had to spend a couple of minutes to understand what it said, and I'm glad I actually got the meaning of it.
Yeah. This is like a horrible map that I found. So I'm just going to show you the route that he, from Norway to Shetland to Faroe Islands, and landed in the east, on the east coast there, sailed all the way to the peninsula, and they did this like almost circled the island halfway, basically. And this is a really bad map. Sorry. So next one there. This is the fjord that they landed in. It is Vatnsfjörður. Sorry, not Vatnafjörður, Vatnsfjörður. And I think there's another picture of it. If you go, yeah.
Oh wow, that's beautiful.
This area. And next one. So the fjord was teeming with fish and game. And they spent more time. So here's an interesting here's an interesting excerpt, like from the line from the Saga. Hang on just a minute.
And in Ingólfur Saga, Ingólfur and his crew, the first thing they do when arriving in Iceland is just go fishing, which is pretty funny. They like take a nap and then they just go fishing right away.
Yeah. Gotta get some food.
Also, maybe Fjolnir can explain why this is, why the spellings and words look weirder in Icelandic than in the
It's
rest
just
of
that
the Nordic languages.
it's actually, I don't think it's Iceland's fault, really. I think it's us that have diverged more, meaning that Iceland, being more isolated, has stayed more true to the Old Norse spelling, and something like Norway, our writings are directly imported from Danish, being under Danish rule for quite a while. The Swedes, I don't know what's up with them, but ours has certainly been, bastardized from what it was back in Ingólfur and Floki's time.
What do you think of the idea? Do you think that the language of a people is, and this is to get a bit more philosophical, do you think the language of a people is to some extent kind of a reflection of their nature or their character? So you listen to
Certainly.
French, and
Uh-huh.
if you were to not even look at the words themselves, but just the cadence and the tones that are used and the way the languages flow.
I
It
mean,
does seem like
you're
there's something
stepping
to
into,
that.
you're basically stepping into the old debate that was. I mentioned that Norwegian is written based on Danish writing, because that was the big debate back when Norway was under Denmark, was whether or not Norway should, once it got free, should it adopt a writing style closer to the Danes, because at the time the Danish way of writing, or writing Danish, was the way you did it in all scholarly or high art work, right? All books were written in Danish, while all diaries and local local stories were written in dialects.
Also, if
And
you
so
look
there
at
was this huge what's the real Norwegian spirit here? Is it writing Danish? No, that's just something the posh people do. And so to this day, we have two official languages in Norway.
also,
The
if you
real
look
question is, what would Linkula have said about it?
Who would have said languages are a human construct and you should probably just sit in the woods and make animal noises or something like that? I don't know. Linkula is a weird
Just go
guy.
fish. Just go fish.
Linkula, after our stream on it, is kind of like a broken clock is still right twice a day type of person. I'm sorry. He seems more based than he is.
So if you look at I think the Eldar Futhark, you have special letters in Iceland that I think have rune correspondence. So we have letters like eth, that's his sound, and th, which makes a letter for the th sounds, which is thought. So this will probably include it in the runic, in the Norse vocabulary. So
yes, we still have the sound, but we don't have the character for it anymore.
Yeah, we do, however. That's why Icelandic looks so weird.
Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah, I was searching for the line that he spoke when they found that it was not that thought that he spoke, that was written when they found the fjord. So it is said, þá var fjörðurinn fullur af veiðiskap og gáðu þeir eigi veiðunum að fá heyjana. So this is why it's important to read the sagas in Icelandic and why it's so difficult to translate. You can easily, þá var fjörðurinn fullur af veiðiskap, which means the fjord was full of fish. And gáðu þeir eigi fyrir veiðum. Now this is a weird way of speaking that is like more of an Old Norse type-esque way of phrasing. Gáðu þeir eigi. We don't speak like that. If you change gáðu to gáfu, gáfu þeir eigi fyrir veiðum, you can.
Oh, now I get what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. You can if you translate, if you just switch eð with f, you get a totally different meaning from the sentence than in the original. So if you say gáfu þeir eigi fyrir veiðum, which means they didn't care about fishing. Yeah. But then if you say gáfu þeir eigi fyrir veiðum að fá heyjana, the correct translation is that they were so busy fishing that they disregarded collecting hay.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's one single letter, switch a single letter, and in the modern Icelandic context, you get a totally different meaning. You get actually the opposite meaning in this case, So this is why translation is very important, and speaking and knowing Icelandic when you are reading this is so important. That's why I do not take anything that Americans do seriously, like the so-called experts that try to translate this or figure this out without learning Icelandic first. I just don't take them seriously. You're gonna cite a source without speaking the language or understanding the proper context of the words. It's utterly absurd, and they call themselves experts.
The problem is also, it's not just the context physically, but also, in a sense, the spiritual context. And I get a lot of this looking into like translations. I spent some time earlier last year looking into translations into English of the Voluspa. And one thing is to be able to translate the text itself into English, but even just trying to understand the paradigm that the text is written in. I think I love this clip that Vingol has on his channel from Werner Herzog when he talks about the Voluspa, and he says in his typical way, he says, when you read this text, you need to have almost an organ for the mythological in his German accent. And I think that's a good way of putting it, because looking into a lot of these texts today, you are so far removed from the mode of being of the person who wrote it that, already there before you even try to translate it, you don't know what half of it really means, right?
It is exactly true, and I would actually argue that a mode of being for Icelanders, long after Christianization, maybe in the 1700s, was much closer to these people, the settlers, the organic mode of being, how they thought, how they spoke, the process of thinking, and the essence essentially was basically the same as before Christianization. Then the so-called modern experts, using Enlightenment, thinking, the dissecting methods, and every single neo-pagan, trying to apply these retarded mystical, like, oh, this is a Thulian sun cult according to this esoteric, no, this is like they misunderstand the mode of being, in my opinion. So, and a lot of it is in the language. And
well, I don't even know if I would dare to say that I have the mode of being or even know what it is, but I think it speaks to the hubris of the people who claim that they understand it, right?
Yeah, we must. My opinion is that we must become that, embody that mode of being again, all of us. So, and also
sorry.
And also like this modern mysticism, and putting these myths into mystical, context, applying some sort of Eastern esoteric mystical philosophy to these stories is also a part of modern way of thinking, like this Americanized New Age, and I reject it completely. Yeah, so the motto.
I want to quickly address the allegations here that you pulled up, Nordhuger, from Nordan on about which version of Norwegian I write, and it's.
I'm assuming you're a Bokmal, but
yes, because I live in the southern part, which means that I'm basically a Dane already. So yeah, but I do understand why it's a question, because there is, especially in the arts, in poetry, and in writing, when you're writing like plays, etc. The New Norwegian, as it's called in English, is a lot wider and has a lot more words and expressions for feelings in a way that the sort of clinical constructed language of Bokmål doesn't have.
It's still bastardized according to
is.
from our view. It's all it's like the astronaut with a gun.
I mean, both
it's
of these are in that sense constructed languages. It's just constructed with different goals, I guess.
The astronaut with a gun to his head, like above Scandinavia, it's all bastardized Icelandic, always has been.
All right.
And Forbidden Anthropologist says, just return to making animal noises in the forest. Yeah, I think that's the ultimate traditional.
I think I enjoy. I'm an Evola enjoyer. I actually enjoy civilization. I'm sorry. I do not want to be a hunter-gatherer. I think we can do better.
And so is this... I'm not as familiar with this portion of history. So was German then popular among the upper nobility for a time? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it makes sense considering, the Germans...
For a long while, German and Germanic culture was sort of the big thing in a lot of Europe. And then, the Two World War happened. And that sort of put a dent in a lot of that. But yes, certainly. And a lot of people, especially in Norway, were...
Danish was also popular here. It was spoken, I think, at one time. It was always everybody spoke Danish on Sundays, and every Icelanders had to, like, if you were to be educated, every educated Iceslander went to Copenhagen, and they had to. So speaking Danish was like considered you will learn it, and you had connection to higher society basically. That was like back maybe in the 1700s to 1800s.
And yeah, I suppose because it's around that time, with Catherine the Great, where you have, in Russia, you have German culture, you have German nobility, essentially just having a Russian or a German aristocracy over a, Russian nation. And Ozark Man has a comment here. He says, "Can't stay for long, but wanted to stop by and say thank you to you kings. The content is always fantastic, and I love hearing the stories that they don't teach us anymore about our past." Well, thanks, man. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of that's the goal, at least. It's to dive into those things that we otherwise wouldn't know about, reconnect with this stuff. And Paul says, learning a lot about my ancestors in the stream. American with Nordic ancestry. Well, same here, bro. I tower over people here. Yeah, you've probably got that 10-foot tall giant's blood in you.
So Walrus brought like probably 10 times more viewers than last time.
Probably.
Yeah. So anyway, if you continue the story must go on. So where were we? Like the cattle died during the winter because of they spent much more of their time fishing than they should have gathering hay. They thought they could, so all of his what's called kvikfé, there's a word for cattle, Icelandic Old Norse word, died, and he was pretty pissed off, obviously. But apparently they survived that. So they probably survived on the fish, maybe. The spring was also very cold. And he was like, this was a very unpleasant experience for him. Like, very harsh winter, no hay, the cattle died, and yeah, pain in the ass, basically. And then he walked up a mountain. I'm not sure exactly which mountain, but yeah, he walked all the way up to the top, looked from north beyond the mountains. He looked north, and he spotted, like, everything was covered with snow. And there was a fjord that he spotted, like full of ice. And thus he named the land Iceland or Iceland, because, yeah, he was freezing his butt off and there was snow everywhere. That's the reason why Iceland has the name it has today. So the crew, then they planned their departure. They packed up their stuff and were getting out of there because this place sucked, apparently. Then they was delayed by a storm, and yeah, as you can see, like this attempted settlement did not go well. They were like everything you can probably imagine, like that could go wrong and went wrong. And Herjólfur, he lost his boat. His boat there was docked, the rope cut, and the boat drifted like for a long, all the way to some beach, you know, and he had to go get the boat again, you know, and the beach is still called today Herjólfsstrand, I think, Herjólfsstaður. So this is a landmark in Iceland where Herjólfur's boat landed, which is really interesting. Let's go next slide. So yeah, they departed from Ásfjörður after the storm. Flóki and Herjólfur got separated somewhere, I think, north of Borgarfjörður. So it's not that far before they got separated. They were apparently on separate ships. So Flóki went into Borgarfjörður, which is the fjord that I mentioned, which is near Faxaflói. Huge fjord, and he stayed somewhere there. And he stayed there for a winter, following winter in Borgarfjörður. Yes, I made an error that I said in the earlier slide that Flóki stayed in Iceland for 1 winter. I think it was 2 winters that he stayed. One in Vatnsfjörður and another in Borgarfjörður. So that's correction of that mistake. I've been to Borgarfjörður, by the way. It's a beautiful area and you have many landmarks. There's a settlement there today, which town is called Borgarfjörður. It's a small town, but like many tourists. Then he set sail when spring arrived to a place called Hrafnafjörður, which means, Borgarfjörður means city fjord. Hrafnafjörður means dock or dock fjord, actually direct translation. Yeah, this is Borgarfjörður. This you know, if you go up, slide above. No, the slide up. Zoom in, sorry. Zoom in. Down. Yeah, this is Borgarfjörður, this huge fjord.
There's a little bit of a lag here, so
yeah.
Apologies.
So we don't know where in this fjord he stayed. At least I couldn't find it. So he might have stayed, and this is a huge area.
Is it
And
typical for when people were settling, would they stay near the back end of fjords, or is it just kind of anywhere there's a good landing spot?
I think just my guess would be with like the best view of the area, like a good view combined with like a good place to gather hay and raise cattle. So I would guess that maybe closer to the sea, not that far inland.
Okay.
So he could spot, other travelers and so forth. So like if you look at Ingólfur and Leifur, they settled on these plateaus that gave them a very good view over the sea. So it is possible that he settled closer rather than to the bay, to the Faxis Bay, rather than further inland. That's what I suspect, but like I said, I don't know. I have no idea. So next slide. Yes, Hrafnafjörður. That's a place that is part of the municipality. It's very close to Reykjavik. It is technically like fused with Reykjavik today. So it is like a sprawling metropolis now, kind of. But yeah. And it's technically its own municipality, but it's like, I don't know, it was 15 minutes from Reykjavik. And you see if you zoom in, you see this Hvaleiri here. You see this peninsula, this down. This miniature peninsula here. Yeah, this thing. This miniature, this green spot. It forms kind of a small peninsula. And there's an Icelandic word for a small peninsula. Which doesn't exist in English. It's called eyri. In the same way that a small fjord is called vík. So do you have a Norwegian equivalent to that, Walrus?
Yeah.
Okay. Like a mini peninsula is called eyri, and the legend says that they found a beached sperm whale on this area. Thus, they called it Hvaleiri, or Whale Peninsula. And this is a landmark. This is a beautiful area, by the way. This is like you can go for a walk there. And
says this is a golf course now.
Yeah, here's a golf course setting. Yeah. So if you could go to the next, he found Herjólfur there again, and then they sailed back during the summer. He found Herjólfur in Hrafnafjörður. So Herjólfur also, this is the map of Borgarfjörður.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah,
Bifrost. Interesting. So they have you get these mythological names incorporated.
This was the same area that you were looking at earlier, like the same fjord.
Yes.
Yeah, so you have Hvítá running into Borgarfjörður. We have two Hvítás in Iceland. One is in the south, and the other one is in Borgarfjörður. And there's also another fjord, which is named Borgarfjörður, in the far northeast, which is called Borgarfjörði Eystra, Borgarfjörður East. It's not the same place. So yeah.
This map has Faxaflói labeled.
Yeah.
In the bay.
Yeah. So next slide. This is Borgarnes, the city. I've been there many times. This is Hvaleiri. This is the beach where they found the beached whale. So, somewhere along that beach, probably on the peninsula.
So if I were to go behind, or on the other side, behind this, that would be the golf course, and you would have Reykjavik off that direction, correct? Just
I think so. Yeah. Reykjavik is south of Hafnarfjörður.
Oh, yeah.
Then there's an interesting tidbit. There is a rock in Hafnarfjörður that was found with runes on it. And these runes are very, very old, at least from the Middle Ages. And there is a theory that Flóki himself marked these runes. And this is a famous landmark. This is called Flókaklöpp or Flóki's Rock. And you have many symbols and these runes basically on the rock. It's a rune stone in Hafnarfjörður. The mainstreams are, they're kind of both ways on it. Some say it's not possible. Some say it's just some farmer from the 1200s, counting cattle on the rock. Others say it's possible that Flóki marked the rock, at least some of it. So that's
and then
that's
maybe it got added to. Is that the idea?
Yeah, they usually get added to, these runestones. So this could be like, he was maybe, it was not uncommon for them to mark before they departed, I was here basically. So who knows? So they arrived home and Flóki said this was a pretty shitty trip. And
oh yeah,
he lost.
Because Ingólfur comment, I believe Ingólfur, one of the members of his crew, later in the follow-up saga remarks on this. They say, "Oh, this Flóki guy returned, just cursing Iceland." Well,
yeah, he was.
He's a weak guy. We'll go there.
He was like he lost all of his property, his cattle.
Well, and he'd lost his daughter.
He lost his daughter in Shetland. You cannot imagine like unless you died probably, But he was pretty bummed out. He was like, "Fuck this place! I'm not returning." Herjólfur, however, he said, "This was pretty decent. It has good and bad qualities. I pretty beautiful land but pretty harsh." Þórólfur, however, the third guy, there was this lingo about him. Hvað drjúpa smjör á hverju strái? A direct translation is að drjúpa smjör. It means to drool butter. A direct translation. It was probably some sort of lingo back then. It means to fawn over, to adore. So Þórólfur was absolutely, fascinated by this place. He loved it here. He was like, this beautiful place. I love it. He spoke very highly of it. And after that, he was called Þórólfur Smjör as a nickname. Probably, the guys making fun of him. But Flóki returned a few years later, after Ingólfur had settled. And he lived in Flókadalur, which is in Skagafjörður, for the rest of his life. So Flóki is one of the first settlers, officially. So I don't know why Flóki resettled Iceland. Maybe he was like,
didn't want to be mogged by Ingólfur.
Yeah, I was exactly thinking, like, Ingólfur's like, okay, he managed to do that. Like, I would look like a pussy if I don't return and settle it. It's like
and with the extent that reputation and honor of that age, especially.
Yeah. So I would suspect that this was one of the many reasons. But he became officially Icelandic. He got his visa from the elves, and he settled in Flókadalur. There's a next slide. Here they are. Here is Flókadalur, where he lived, and here are they racing in 2012, erecting a monument to Flóki, Hrafnaflóki. And it still stands there to this day, and here's a statue of him. So,
oh, there's the raven.
yeah, so thus concludes the saga of Flóki Viðgerðarson, or Hrafnaflóki. So what do you guys make of that?
That's extraordinary. And just the cojones of these guys to, when you look at, here, I'll pull up a map because just talking about it doesn't quite do it justice. But, if you're living back then and you're like, all right, I'm in Norway, or I guess that one guy from Sweden, but you're sailing off, it's pretty easy to miss and just like end up lost in the infinite abyss of the Atlantic. So you have to really have aim your arrow of your boat correctly, and you have to really have some courage to get that far. Because let's say, or if you're trying to go towards the Shetlands or to the Faroe Islands, it's very easy to miss and then wind up just lost in the North Sea or in the Atlantic.
Well, it's easier to hit the Shetlands and the Faroe Islands, as we talked a bit earlier about these sort of sea paths that exist along the coast there. But yeah, of course, there's always the risk, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the ratio for how often you had a successful voyage versus one where things went bad, but I remember in Ingólfur Saga, they're in Iceland and they have their camp, and then they're having a fire, and they find some driftwood with the prow of another longship, and they say, "Oh, dragon," because it's shaped like a dragon. They're like, "Oh, dragon, I wonder what battles you went to, what things you saw before your master got drowned in the sea." And I mean, that sort of stuff happened all the time. And also, going back into the mindset of the people of the time, they didn't have the monsters at the edge of the map were very much a real thing. There wasn't this like, oh, we've charted the seas of the world and we know these creatures exist and these ones don't, so we have to worry about these ones but not these other creatures. Like, to them, I mean, it was very
you
like
actually don't know
so
what
forth.
If you miss the Faroe Islands, what are you gonna hit, right? Is it gonna be death or is it gonna be slow death, right?
right, yeah. Are you gonna be devoured by some sea serpent? Very real possibility back then.
It goes a bit back to sort of the mode of being we talked a bit about earlier when we got stuck on language and translations.
Yeah, I'm just gonna mention that Garðar the Swede, he stayed during the winter in a place called Húsavík, which is far north. And there's a town that exists there today. So you can visit it. It's I think, isn't that a town like in this stupid Eurovision movie with Will Ferrell?
Really? Wait, what movie?
I've seen the trailer for this movie. I know it's a real movie.
It's supposed to happen in Húsavík. I think yeah, that's a town where Garðar was that place where Garðar was settled in. Now settled, he stayed during the winter. Húsavík.
This is apparently this is the story of the Fire Saga.
Yeah, the story of
it's a Eurovision thing.
Yeah, Nordanon. Google Translate is retarded. Bautasteinn, I think it's an Icelandic word.
I always go with Fjolnir when I have these questions. I figure
we have a literal name for steinar called Bautasteinar. It's an Icelandic word. Byggingarsteinar, it means building stones. It describes a particular type of you're talking about these monumental pagan rocks, right? Yeah. So I think that's what we're talking about. Google Translate is shit, and also all American self-claimed or foreign self-claimed Old Norse experts that don't speak Icelandic. Listen to me instead. Simple as.
I've got a quick comment here from Gamer King. Love the username. Yeah, we're all about our Gamer Kings out here. Says, hey Matt, love your videos and the history you share. Would you ever do a similar formatted video on religion in Scandinavia from Asatru to the Reformation? Yeah, I mean, I think that's a topic that, you know, there's some scripted stuff that's good for that, and then some of that stuff is like so complex that I think it warrants doing some of these deep dive episodes. Because, you know, Fjolnir's talked about wanting to do more with the Reformation era in particular, and
I
is under.
That's
like,
a very interesting history.
People discuss religion in Scandinavia a decent amount, but you know how well it's done. It's usually like a very overly simplified version of it. So it would be nice to kind of flesh this stuff out.
I think it is best that we start covering the settlement period and the major settlers, chronologically, and then maybe we cover the what's so-called Commonwealth Age or Þjóðveldisöld, which is where we had, a permanent Commonwealth, Alþingi, and we were not technically
a part of independence years.
Yeah, it's like technically like kind of a half-assed independence, but you're still like highly connected to Norway. But
yeah,
we were on thing basically, and it's considered like interesting to do this analysis in like an apply Spenglerian terms to this. Like the settlement age is kind of this Wild West era. You had literally most of the heroes from the sagas are from the settlement age. And they're kind of like
spring of the
kind of like the cowboys, claiming land and the blood feuds, and
we'll get to the blood feuds and the a little bit more cowboy on our next follow up to this.
And the Commonwealth Age is more like a high golden age, where it's temperate. You also have much more temperate atmosphere. Iceland was more fertile back then. You had not that many people, and you had more established rule of law. So, and most of the decline in Iceland was not because of like societal decay, but mostly because of like natural disasters and cooling. That's our civilizational cycle. There was no. You had very hard times because of eruptions and harsh winters as the temperature dropped. Yeah, then we have. Yeah, sorry.
Oh, just saying, and I think it would be good to cover some of these topics or some of the stuff post-Viking Age, because once you get post-Viking Age, or even, post kind of 1100, there's really it's hard to find good material, especially on YouTube or in English, about a lot of this Nordic history. Like how many people in America have even heard of the Great Northern War? Very, very few have even heard the term. So I
blame the Brits. They've flooded the channels with Viking shows and documentaries.
And that's partly why there's more Viking histories, because there was that British connection and interaction. So the Brits find that a bit more interesting because it directly involves them. Whereas a lot of this other stuff, a bit less so. It's kind of in our own domain. But in the English language, there just really isn't this material that's all that easy to access.
There is a lot of interesting, after we got the, when on the last stream, remember when we asked the guy about, the difference between Iceland or the Nordic or Norse sagas and and the Anglo-Saxon chronicles. And I've been thinking about these questions. My take on it is essentially my take on English and German and French identity. Essentially, is they are in essence a collection of Germanic and Celtic tribe LARPing as the Roman Empire. Does that make sense? They took the Latin alphabet. They tried to rebuild the glories of this ancient empire. And they successfully so LARPed as a Roman Empire. Like they built the cathedrals and they took upon the religion, and they became the next superpower, while Scandinavia was much more untouched by the classical world, always has been.
I think that might be,
that's the main difference, I think.
Yeah.
I think there was very little difference between the first Saxons in England and the Scandinavians, but they took a different path. They started LARPing as Romans. But the first thing we did, however, when we came in touch, we were influenced from classical civilization. We were introduced to the Latin alphabet. What's the first thing we did? We wrote everything down. We did not, play the game of empire, and I don't think we were ever meant to. But we are chroniclers of history. We are gatekeepers of the lore, so to speak. That has always been our role. And this is where you find the untouched, Germanic ways. I'm not saying that, adapting classical is a bad thing, but I'm saying that we did far less of it than the continentals did. And my kind of take of it, maybe the wise men here, when they discovered the written language, when they adopted the written language, even after Christianization, maybe they came to the conclusion that, empires rise and fall. But manuscripts, legends, stories, books. You have great books always outlast great empires. So maybe in their eyes, chronicling this stuff was much more important than building some new imperial state like the Saxons did. So that's, I would say, our part in the historical, process of Europe is chronicling these events. It's scholarly.
I mean, it's the height of Germanic autism to focus on building systems upon systems instead of appreciating what's right in front of you now. So,
I mean, we tried to play empire with like Carl Gustav. I'm successful to a point, but I think not sure that is our role. Like our role is.
I mean, you can almost see it even in you mentioned the Commonwealth era, where Iceland is technically under Norwegian rule at the time, but not really, because it seems like, I think almost at the end of the day, no one wanted to bother with the headache of having to rule that far away. Like, how are we going to get over there? Well, we have to go by boat for like X amount of days, and half of us are going to die. Well, okay, let's just let them do their thing, right? And we'll do our thing. Literally things.
I mean, I think Iceland has been pretty much indistinguishable from Norway for the vast majority of the history. Except we had Alþingi, we didn't have jarls.
Yeah.
We had Goðar. They were these kind of like these council of elders that came together and formed a thing and settled disputes, made new laws. They were not like warlords, like these petty feudal kings like in Norway. So Norway became a unified monarchy very fast. Like we kept the so-called Goðorð. We never had a king. So they were sort of technically a commonwealth.
Well, I think there's a bit of a analogy to much of what happened in America during the settlement there, where the sort of libertarianism in the settlement process allowed for it to be a much more stable. I'm gonna say multicultural, but you understand what I mean, like multi district, I guess, sort of deal that didn't cause any infighting.
Yeah, but the
Yeah, that's a
Commonwealth
good point.
it didn't last for that long. I think during the 1200s.
No, and neither did it do in America. I mean, at some point
Yeah.
you're going to run out of land, and then you're going to have to pick a leader, right? You can't do, well, we disagree, so we're just going to go over here forever, right?
I would say the Commonwealth was a pretty shitty system. It didn't properly settle feuds. It led to the so-called Sturlungaöldin after the Commonwealth age, which didn't last that long. We had the Sturl, which pretty much Game of Thrones kind of like these families feuding over everything, and ongoing civil war, and the Norwegian crown put a stop to it in the 1200s. And
yeah, eventually, I mean, you have to.
After that, Iceland became more stable and better for it. I would argue the Commonwealth system is, they like to romanticize it, but the crown monarchy is much better in my opinion.
For stability, certainly.
Yeah, for stability. It's like you always end up with these wealthy families feuding and trying to become kings themselves. So
There's a passage in Ingólfur Saga, and this is sort of a teaser for next time. But there's a connection that I made with this that was interesting about the homesickness for Norway, and maybe this is something you guys can touch on a bit with your own experience. But it reminded me very much because I was reading about some accounts of Americans who had, or rather, I don't recall if it was a Norwegian or a Swedish family who had settled in America in the 1800s, around 1860, which is when a lot of that settlement began. But it was about this woman who she was just sharing about how she was living out in the prairie, and then would just sometimes get so lonely that she would just like throw herself on her back in the middle of nowhere and just like scream into the sky about how much just because she missed her homeland so much. And it reminds me a little bit of, and maybe this is a little harder on the women both in Iceland and in America in this time, because they're kind of yearning even more so for that home, because they're kind of being brought along on this journey. And this is about Helga, Leif's wife, who sings as the ropes are being loosened to their longship and they're about to set off to Iceland. She sings this song, and she sings, "There was I born, there was I wed, there are my father's bones. There are the hills and fields, the streams and rocks that I love. There are houses and temples, women and warriors and feasts, ships and songs and fights, a crowded, joyous land. I go to an empty land." And that's, when you're just starting off, especially because Iceland was just totally uninhabited at the time. So you're just setting off from this place that is a place with a clear history and with this already established life, that to set off for a new place and recreate that is, that takes a while. That's a big sacrifice that's being made. I mean, is there kind of that feeling of homesickness in Iceland for Norway? But again, the Icelanders have done such a great job of recreating so much of that same culture and their own new home there. And they're still surrounded by kinsmen, and they're surrounded by their traditions and connection to the land and to the past. What do you guys make of that?
I have this poem. I'm not sure if this is a proper translation of this poem. I'm trying to find it here in Icelandic.
Time while he tries to find the translation. I mean, I think one of the reasons why the Icelandics did develop the Fjolnir mentioned the Gothar, I think the long name is the Gothord's men, meaning the good words men of good word, who were simultaneously politicians in a way, but also sort of wise elders who, some of them, their only job, if I recall, is to remember laws and customs. And I think this is a outgrowth of exactly the thing you're mentioning there, Matt, with when you go on an expedition like this to a place you know is totally empty, then sort of the need to define your own culture and your own, I suppose, lineage of art and culture becomes quite important quite quickly. So it's, I don't know what point I'm trying to make. I'm just sort of agreeing with you with so many words. It must have been tough, and I'm feeling the meme of born too late to explore the Earth, but born too late to explore space, right? Sorry, born too early to explore space, but born too late to explore the Earth. Because the magic is gone, right? These days.
Yeah, and I see
even if
Iceland
I wanted to, I couldn't, right? And even climbing Mount Everest has become this sort of gay commercialized product, right?
You spend your however many $1,000 and you get your prepackaged.
I'm not saying it's not dangerous and not impressive.
Oh, I'm sure
but,
it's I'm sure it's really tough. But it's not new. It's not unexplored.
It's not you and your family go off to this place where no one else lives and you're going to make it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, you do see the Nordics have done a good job where they've settled of recreating what they had before and keeping, well, much more short term in America, because you had these towns that were these little Swedens or little Norways, and they very much did have that same village life. They still had, so much of the same culture, and in some places still maintained the language for quite a while. There's a city or a small town in Washington that until the 1980s was still, the majority of the people there still spoke Norwegian, and it was frowned upon to speak English. But that's eventually shifted now, and that's kind of the thing that helped Iceland so much, is they didn't have another power that was sort of pulling them into their own system. They were very much off on their own, so they were able to sustain that and really bolster that sense of self.
Yeah, and Norwegian and this culture isn't the only one in the US. There's tons of stories like that. I mean, you can go to places in Texas these days and meet people who can only speak German, right? So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I mean, it still exists.
I think Texas. Maybe I'm misremembering.
Texas does have some German towns that are almost exclusively German.
I mean, they're old people now, but yeah, it's there's so much that has been airbrushed neatly away from how complicated and interesting the world is compared to what we are told, what we're taught, in terms of the narratives that have been passed down to us. And it makes me quite sad, because the more I read of books from before 1945, the more I feel that the past is not just a different country, it's a different plane of existence, right?
I cannot find this poem in Landnámabók. Is this made up or something?
The poem I was reading.
Yes.
This is from Ingólf's Saga. The Jenny Hall's translation of Ingólf's Saga.
This is not in the Icelandic version.
Interesting. I wonder if it was.
They just add the.
Yeah, I don't know. That's why it's helpful to be able to check with someone who knows actual Icelandic. So,
I mean, are they literally adding shit into the translations? So the sagas, Ingólfs Saga, it's really short. These are like short stories, and like whenever they speak, it is quoted. So, I mean, maybe I'm reading a different version, but in the one I'm reading,
are there any? Because there are a few very brief songs in my translation of Ingólf's Saga, which was, I think, written around 1900. This translation.
This could have been like a romantic. I think this is made up.
Could be
probably some romantic era idealism going on. I'm here reading. I have the sagas in front of me. Ingólfur speaks like a one-liner, like when Hjörleifur dies.
Mm-hmm.
But Helga doesn't speak.
This is when they're still in Norway and they're bringing the women back because they go to Iceland. They come back to Norway to bring the women there, and this is right as they're leaving. According to my version. So
this is not.
I will defer to you. I will defer to yours though.
This is. I suspect. I maybe have to try to find a new version, but the version I'm reading is. This just seems to be added on or made up in the romantic effort. It's like what did she think? Because this poem sounds very English. It sounds kind of too convenient for translation. It sounds very good in English. If you were to translate a song or a poem directly from Old Norse, you couldn't do that without.
Yeah.
This one doesn't. Kind of retarded.
This one doesn't rhyme, because the nice thing about rhyming in languages is that can help preserve the integrity of the language, because it needs to keep that structure for it to actually rhyme and keep the right cadence.
You seem to have a heavily romanticized version of English.
It probably is, and I've noticed the translations from Hall appear to be a bit more romanticized or have a bit more addition to them, maybe a little more extra flourish, which I'm not really a big fan of myself. If it is just added on, it does give an insight into, I guess, the mindset of the writers who were translating 100 years ago.
They are trying to apply a certain mindset to these people, which kind of pisses me off, because
if they're doing that, they should be clear about it.
They should distinguish. I mean, in the original one, Helga doesn't speak at all. I think she's like not that. She's not a big character. She certainly doesn't write a song like this elaborate. So I don't know. My guess is this is made up. My take, but I like I said, I could be wrong. At least the sagas I read, they are pretty raw. They are.
Oh yeah.
They are. Just this happened. He was related to this guy, and he spoke thus. It's basically
that's very much how that's kind of how the Anglo-Saxon chronicles read. The Anglo-Saxon chronicles are very dry. They're very much, this happened on this date, and then this happened. Much more so than any of the sagas, as far as I'm aware. And then occasionally you'll get a nugget of something really fascinating in there. I find the sagas are much, although they can be maybe drier than the romanticized version, they're still a lot more rich and still a lot more novelized
I can
And-
respect any effort of romanticizing anything. Like Walrus said, we live in this world where everything is, guided by techniques and mechanized.
Very
and
cynical too. I mean, we live in a very cynical age where everything is about stripping the magic, stripping the anything, that's not measurable.
And it's very, very, very interesting that, when, for example, the English, their imperial prospects, successful imperial prospects in Spenglerian senses, trapped them, enslaved themselves with their own success by LARPing as the Roman Empire, and created this monster called the Industrial Revolution.
Well, that's what Thomas Carlyle says. He says in Past and Present, he says, we have so much productivity. We have more productivity than ever before, but the actual conditions for the men of our country are worse than they've ever been. So what is this sort of machine that we're enslaving ourselves to?
Yeah. So and the reaction. The action to this, I would just depict it as progress towards oblivion, basically. But it's interesting that the main reaction to the Industrial Revolution was the Romantic movement, and towards against Enlightenment thinking and against this industrialization of everything and technica, the thinking process of techniques and stuff was Romanticism. And I would argue that the Romantic movement, one of the foundation stones of the Romantic movement, were the Icelandic sagas, because you had it's possible that that this movement wouldn't have taken place without the sagas. So again, you see the importance of record keeping. These wise men decided to keep these stories, and these stories were used hundreds of years later to fight against the imperial narrative, the monster of the Industrial Revolution, again with the dichotomy of like how powerful stories and words can be, and that very much influenced Tolkien, and he made his own version of this style of writing and these types of tales for the Saxons. And his dichotomy was explicitly addressing the Industrial Revolution and the destruction of idealism and everything sacred, basically. So the destruction of the transcendent, basically. So that's a very interesting, example of how, again, the writings influenced ideas that played part in a huge backlash against this type of thinking.
I spent a minute here to dig up an old. The first live stream I ever did was on Knut Hamsun, the Norwegian author, and I've been a bit of a champion of his here online. So I figured I'll dig up this old quote that he has from one of his articles where he writes about progress. He says, "For what is progress, that we may drive our Ford wagons faster on the roads? No, if a man balances his books by such methods, he will be sure to come up empty-handed. Progress is the body's required rest and the soul's required peace. Progress is human satisfaction." I like that one. Compared to sort of the techniques or the reign of quantity that you find in the Industrial Revolution.
I think the reason also why people and the Romantics especially like the sagas is it gives you a glimpse into life and a mode of being completely devoid of techniques and Enlightenment values in kind of in detail. So you see an alternative mode of being compared to, rationalism and these Enlightenment humanism, that sort of bullshit. And that inspired people a lot.
And just the amount of writing, the volumes of writing there is from this era is pretty staggering compared to other times and places in history. You know, you go to anything from a lot of other eras of the Bronze Age or the Stone Age, forbid, and it's, you know, there's way more speculation, and it's way more just sort of going off of very limited archaeology and genetic research that you have to work with. Whereas this, you have, you know, thousands of pages, quite literally, depending on the size of your font, and it's just this treasure trove.
Yeah, one question I've been, you know, kind of reflecting on, like, why did they write this down so quickly, almost immediately after the alphabet, Latin alphabet, arrived here? And maybe like in historical terms, like very, very shortly after, and so much of it. And my take is, and how could they do it so vividly? And I think it's obvious because they had this culture of storytelling. They had this, there are described these gatherings where, you know, in weddings and funerals and so forth, and events, Alþingi, among they used to tell these stories at those events, and everybody knew them and memorized them, and it didn't change that much over time. It was a very strong culture of verbal, you know, storytelling, and they decided to collect them all in a relatively short time in manuscripts. And it's very interesting that in Iceland, in the Goðorð, there was not a circulation of elites after Christianization. In Norway, you had, you know, all of the other petty warlords, the Jarls, were displaced by Haraldur. And then Ólafur Tryggvason came and Christianized the nation, and another king, you know, eventually became Christian and made it officially Christian. In Iceland, the Goðar literally just switched hats and became priests and studied the Latin alphabet and built a monastery. These were the same guys that were Goðar, you know. And there was this, like, during the Christianization, there's an interesting for another deep dive. There was a argument about whether Iceland should remain Christian or become Christian or remain pagan. That's a story unto itself. But the elite did not circulate. It was the same elite, and they made the informed decision, you know, and they clearly cared about these stories, and the church kept them, you know, record kept them, and also what was important was knowing your lineage, your family lineage, because you hear these stories about these heroes and these people in the sagas boasting, like, I am descendant of this and that guy all the way back, you know, X many years, and I'm related to him. So knowing your family connections was a very strong part of the culture. And that is also probably why the priests traced the family lines back and recorded every single settler and every single birth in Iceland, you know, and you just use baptism as an excuse, basically.
And it's that they are part of this continued story. The sagas are, in some sense, ongoing through, you know, the sons of the sons of the sons of the men before them.
This mentality is also in Iceland today. You also have this, like, typical conversation. Oh, yes, I am, you know, family lineages, and, you know, who is part of your family and where from which part of the country you hail from is still part of everyday conversation here. And it's exactly like the scene in The Lord of the Rings, you know, like when was it Pippin in the bar? He is like tracing his lineage and describing how Frodo and him are related. He's my first cousin and second cousin through this, my mother's side. This is a typical Icelandic.
He's my second cousin.
Yeah.
My mother's side. Well, yeah. So if chat has any questions, drop them in now. I know Walrus will have to get going, and then I'll have to get going as well. So if you guys have got some questions, throw it in there quick.
I'm gonna have to leave. I'm sorry. I have to get going. But thank you all for having me on. Both of you, you especially, Matt.
Well, Fjolnir did all the work today, so thanks. Yeah, thanks for hopping on, buddy.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone in chat, for coming and hanging out. I mean, if anyone's interested, my YouTube channel is a walrus, just like my name. You can find anything else there that you might need.
I will link that in chat. So all of you guys here, that's the rule. You gotta follow my guests. So that's the ticket.
The only podcast worth listening to, basically.
Oh, nice. Thank you. All right. See you guys around.
See ya.
Thank you.
So how long have you been streaming?
We've been going for just over 2 hours. So yeah, so I put the link in there, so I know you guys see it. Go check that out. And yeah, let me know what you guys think of the stream. I figure we'll just answer a few comments.
Should we go on for like 2.5, like last time? 2:30?
I'd like to, but I will have to. I will have to get going. I've got some family obligations.
Yeah.
And we'll save our part 2, which is also about the settlement. This is more the discovery, but the settlement. Well, thank you, Bjarki. Much appreciated. Glad you could come out.
Next will be Ingólfur, the story of Ingólfur Arnarsson.
And that's got a little more action to it if you guys are into that.
Okay.
So that'll be quite fun.
So
do you have any closing thoughts there, Fjolnir, while we wait for chat?
No, just answering, let's just answer some questions in the chat.
Yeah, no, that's true, Nord. They are very similar in that, this is so and so, son of so and so, begotten by, and then you get the whole patrilineage going back. It's very interesting because it is this idea that, part of the modern idea is that not only are we a bit atomized in that we're separated from our communities in a 2-dimensional layer, but also in the y-axis going up, we are also separated from those who came before. So there's this sort of double layer of atomization. We're separated from the people around us and the people who we would normally interact with or have as part of like an extended family or community, but we're also separated from those who came before and for those who will come after us for generations. Whereas in the past, there was this idea that this, the experience of, there's a raven outside. Funny enough. There is this idea that you're far away or you're not far away, rather. Sorry, that raven distracted me. I think I'm getting a sign here at the end of the stream. But yeah, there's this idea that this connection is a 3-dimensional layer. So I think with...
So I see... I'm just going through... The Faroe Islands was taken by the British. It was technically, it still is a part of Denmark, by the way. So it's not an independent nation. And to us, modern Faroese, we can read it and can understand it, but it sounds so, no offense, like to Faroese, lovely people, fine people, but their language sounds so retarded to us. It's like unbelievable. It's like we can't. The fact that we can understand that much of it, but some words are like bastardized. It's so hilarious to listen to. It always makes me laugh.
If you guys can see this, here's the raven. He's a big guy. I thought he was a crow at first, but the size is way too big to be a crow. The beak kind of looks a little more raven-like.
Yeah, the Faroe Islands are kind of like a bizarro version of Iceland.
Have you been there in person?
Yes.
Oh man. So you've been to Faroe. Have you been to the Shetlands?
Nope.
Okay, yeah, no, that'd be worth stopping by too, I suppose.
Shetlands.
Are crows larger than ravens? Maybe it's the reverse. Maybe I have it backwards. I'm pretty sure ravens are bigger.
No, ravens are huge. Crows are. There are no crows here.
Yeah. We're crows are more common here, but ravens, we still see them every now and again. But I think, what's this? Yeah, I mean, Nord brings up a good point. I like the Burkean idea that if there is a social contract, it's unstated and includes the dead and yet to be born, as well as the living. Yeah, I mean, if there, and this is diving into the philosophical side of things, but there's this idea that, the social contract, if you're going to, let's say, you're going to sacrifice the labor and the time of your life to build a country or build something for your descendants. The idea is that goes two ways. Like, you wouldn't do that unless there was the expectation that your descendants are going to, continue in that tradition and are going to, use and honor the work that you've done before. So it's this two-way. So in that way, we are still communicating with the dead. We're communicating with those who've come before us because, they would not have done what they did to help us in so many ways if they were assuming we would, turn around and just spit in their face. So there is this way that, even though what they have done is already in the past, we are still communicating with that.
Exactly. And that's why also you had, his reverence for the ancestors. There was also the idea that an ancestor or some dead people could return from the dead and take vengeance for your misdeeds. That was always a very common motif here.
Yeah, I think. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Also, yeah. So that's my take on it.
Well, hey, I think that's a good stopping point for us today. Again, we're going to follow up on this when we get to Ingólfur Saga and we get to a little bit more action and adventure in that one, and some details on crossing the sea to get to Iceland and settling, and how did we go? How did Reykjavik form? We're going to get into that. It's going to be
one thing. Norton asks if Iceland they teach Danish. Yes, they do. I took Danish classes, and but I forgot everything about Danish. I don't understand anything.
And how was it to learn English? I mean, I assume they have it in school, but does it help just because there's such a volume of English material and media?
Yes, that's the main reason, like cartoons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
did you ever watch Moomin Valley?
Yes, I loved it.
Okay, nice.
It's best in Icelandic, but it sounds much better in Icelandic than Finnish.
You know what blew my mind is that of the Scandinavian friends I've talked to, none of them know about or have seen or grew up with the Peanuts cartoons, the Charlie Brown cartoons. Did you grow up with that?
Peanuts.
Like Peanuts, Charlie Brown. Really, not ringing. Okay,
No, no, I don't. I mean, I recognize the drawings, but I never watched this as a kid.
Oh man. So wait, let me pull this up. So this guy.
Yeah,
Charlie Brown. You never watched this? Wow. Okay, that's interesting. That's like a huge nostalgia thing over here. Like I didn't grow up with like Moomin Valley or anything. We're pretty disconnected from our homeland cartoons, but wow. No, that's just funny to me.
Asterix and Obelix was a big thing here, as well as Tintin.
Yeah, my friend one of my Swedish friend recommended Asterix and how do you say Obelix? Because that's a French cartoon, right?
Obelix.
Obelix, yeah, because they're these gulls. It's those are pretty fun, and they're like really well done. They're like clearly had a good budget and studio behind them, but those aren't really well known in America, even though they have English versions of it.
Yeah, I was remembering there's this guy, this YouTube channel, the latest season of Barbarians is apparently so atrocious that he said it was as historically accurate as Asterix and Obelix.
Man, wow! Actually, that's that's almost an endorsement right there. Huh? Yeah. Okay. So I guess it's pretty much just an American thing. Maybe my English friends. I'll have to reach out to my English friends or my British friends and see if they know what I'm talking about. And what is Ronja Rovadottir?
Ronja Ræningjadóttir. It's a story from Astrid Lindgren. It's a Swedish story. Everybody here knows it, and also other stories from the Swedes, like from Astrid Lindgren's material. It's actually these are fantastic stories. She was a good writer, no doubt. It's about these Norwegian bandits in old days, and she's like a daughter of this bandit. It's supposed to happen. I'm not sure when, probably some before the Viking Age or something. And yeah, Robert daughter. And also one of my favorite stories, like, is Emil in Lönneberga. If you know that story.
No, I don't.
It's about a Swedish boy in Sweden that grows up like in late 1800s in Småland in Sweden, and he is like this very intelligent, capable, but kind of mischievous, boy, 5-year-old. I love these stories growing up.
Bjarki recommends the 1980s film Ronja Rovadottir. Oh yeah. So I will add that to my list of things to check out.
And also the 70s shows, like they made a show from the 70s of Emil, like really well done.
And
I also identified as Emil as a boy, like every Scandinavian boy did, basically.
Oh, nice.
It's an archetype of the Nordic youth.
And Nord recommend, or he said they read Donald Duck comics a lot. I know about the Donald Duck comics, but I never read them. I never really read any of the Disney comics. I read. You guys aren't familiar with Calvin and Hobbes, are you?
We had to read Donald Duck in Danish here.
Nice.
Then they were translated.
Yeah.
So, and also there's another interesting story from Astrid Lindgren that you might want to cover. It's called My Brother Lionheart, and it's about these two Swedish brothers that die and they go into the afterlife, and it's this fantasy realm but it is ruled by a tyrant that controls a dragon. So that's a very good story.
Interesting.
Very
What would
romantic.
you say? What would you say is the archetype of the Swedish or the Scandinavian boy? What would you say is that archetype?
I think Emil
Just sort of carefree,
Yeah.
hanging out in the woods. Is that kind of the?
Yeah, Emil kind of nails it basically. A bit mischievous, but on borderline ADHD, but very, very sharp, very capable, self-sufficient.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate to grow up a bit more out in the country, so I was able to just hang out in the woods and get up to a little bit of mischief. So I mean, that is kind of the archetype, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh wow, Astrid Lindgren was your neighbor. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Damn.
Well, we can save some of the nostalgia for next time. I'll have to get going, but
yeah. So
hey,
I think it's good.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. We had a lot of new viewers today, so that was pretty exciting. I'll check out your guys' recommendations, and we'll dive into the next saga next time.
Okay.
Yeah, go check out Walrus's channel. And anything you
join the Longhouse in the Matrix channel also.
There you go. All right. Well, hey, take care, everyone.
Okay. Goodbye.